In 399 BC in Athens, Socrates was executed for asking too many questions. How about Egypt, Persia, and China in that same year? Let's hear their stories, many lives, many times. Athens, Greece, 399 BCE, the trial and death of Socrates. Short story, the deciding pebble. Socrates does not recognize the gods of the city. Socrates is poisoning and corrupting the youth. Meletus's sycophantic voice echoed, ricocheting off the courthouse walls, as grating as the screech of metal on stone. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, mine included, were fixed on a shabby old man standing alone in the circle of judgment. But my mind wasn't there. It drifted back to a sweltering afternoon in the agora when I overheard Socrates ask a sculptor, a colleague of mine, "You say you carve a beautiful statue, but what is beauty itself?" That question had lodged itself in my mind ever since. It was like an invisible fissure in the most expensive block of marble. The naked eye couldn't see it, but a stonemason knows that a single misplaced strike of the hammer could shatter the whole thing into 100 pieces. Let me tell you, I am Lycan, a stonemason of Athens. My life is stone, chisel, and hammer. To me, the world needs order, clear rules, like how a straight line cannot bend and a right angle cannot be obtuse. Every day, I seek perfection in every line, turning lifeless blocks of rock into the straight columns of temples and the statues of gods with flawless proportions. Precision is my truth. Our Athens had just staggered out of its darkest years. The Peloponnesian War had taken nearly everything from us. I had seen brothers who never returned from Sicily, seen our proud city walls torn down by the Spartans, and chiseled too many tombstones for families with no men left. Then came the brutal rule of the 30 tyrants. Our democracy had only just been restored. It was as fragile and vulnerable as a new wall, its mortar still wet. And to rebuild, the foundation must be solid. That foundation was built on faith in our patron gods, absolute respect for the law, and a shared belief in a preordained order. Socrates, with his relentless questions, was like a quarryman, diligently chipping away at the very foundation we were desperately trying to patch up. The men in power feared he was creating a generation of rebels, while common men like me feared his questions would anger the gods and bring their wrath upon Athens once more. I returned to the suffocating reality of the trial. When it was his turn to speak, Socrates did not beg. He didn't weep or bring out his wife and children to appeal to our pity. No, he calmly lectured us. He compared himself to a gadfly, sent by the gods to sting the great but lazy horse of Athens to keep it awake and moving. A fire rose in my chest. We, the citizens who had bled and wept for this city, were being called a lazy horse. He was standing before a court that held his life in its hands, and he chose to be arrogant. That arrogance, to a builder like me, was a contempt for order, for the law, and for the sacrifices of us all. And then, the moment of decision arrived. We were each given 2 pebbles, one solid, one hollow. The solid pebble was for a guilty verdict. I clutched it in my calloused palm. I did not hate Socrates, but I loved Athens more. I feared the chaos his questions could unleash more than I feared an enemy's sword. To protect the still, wet wall of our democracy, I had to remove the man who threatened its foundation. I dropped my pebble into the fateful urn. It was a necessary hammer blow, though I knew it would shatter a masterpiece of creation. Socrates is dead. Athens did seem quieter after that. No one loitered in the market corners anymore, asking questions that unsettled people. I went back to my work, to my stones and my precision. But something had changed forever. Sometimes, while carving a statue, my hand would suddenly stop in mid-air. I would ask myself, what makes a statue beautiful? And the old man's voice would echo in my ear, a relentless whisper. But what is beauty itself, Lycan? I see his students, like Plato, gathering. Their eyes are no longer lost, but burn with a different kind of fire. They are writing down his every word. It seemed that killing Socrates didn't extinguish his questions. On the contrary, it made him a martyr. It made his questions immortal. We had eliminated a man to protect the city's order. But now, in the quiet of Athens, I find myself asking, is an order built on the fear of questions truly an order worth protecting? We craved stability, but did we pay for it with the very soul of Athens, the spirit of inquiry and freedom? And the greatest question that haunts me nightly, the one I now ask you, is this: when you must choose between the safety of a familiar order and a thorny truth that might shatter it, which way will your pebble fall?
Egypt, 399 BCE. Founding of the 29th dynasty. Short story. Dynasty of dust. They say the Egyptian desert can swallow an entire army. But I, Lycomedes, a veteran mercenary from distant Hellas, have learned that human ambition is the more treacherous quicksand, silently swallowing whole dynasties. I came to this land of pyramids not for the glory of the pharaohs or the divinity of their animal-headed gods. I came for the glint of silver drachmas. My sword, my shield, my very life, they all have a price. We Greeks were hired by Pharaoh Amyatius to keep his throne secure. But in this dusty military camp, where the barley beer flows stronger than loyalty, I could feel a storm brewing. The rumors spread faster than plague. They trickled from the native Egyptian soldiers, snaked through the ranks of Libyan mercenaries, and finally reached our ears in a garbled pidgin. They spoke of Nepherites, a general in Men's, a pure-blooded Egyptian who was gathering forces. I saw the worry etched deep into the faces of the Egyptian commanders, my countrymen. They just scoffed, went back to their dice, and argued over whose sword was sharper. To them, it didn't matter who sat on the throne, as long as he paid on time. But I was different. I've seen too many city-states fall, too many kings driven into exile. I know that when the winds change, hired swords like us are the first to be swept away. The order to march came as swift as an arrow. My unit was dispatched toward Men's to crush the rebellion. But on the blistering march, under the sun of Ra, all I saw was an army dissolving from within. Soldiers deserted in the night, leaving behind single sets of footprints in the sand before vanishing. Rations dwindled, and water became more precious than gold. The rot was more terrifying than any enemy. One evening, I shared a piece of dry bread with an old Egyptian soldier named Bak. He wasn't a professional warrior like me. His hands were rough, calloused more from years holding a plow than a spear. He pointed to the stars, his voice low and sad. Our pharaoh has forgotten his people, he told me. He builds temples in size while the Persians still threaten our borders. We need an Egyptian, someone who understands the heart of this land. He spoke of Nepherites with a glimmer of hope in his weary eyes. Bak's words cut me like a knife. Who was I fighting to protect? A foreign king I had never even met. To fight against whom? A general heralded as a savior by his own people. What was the loyalty I was selling truly worth? The battle erupted without fanfare, just screams and the harsh clang of metal on metal. We Greek hoplites formed a textbook wall of shields. But we quickly realized we were on the losing side. Nepherites' men fought like lions defending their pride. They had more than weapons, they had belief. In the chaos, I came face to face with a massive warrior. His round shield, the way he held his spear, I knew instantly he was another Greek. For a split second, we both froze. Through the slit of my helmet, I looked directly into his eyes. I saw no enemy, no hatred, only a weary reflection of myself. We were both strangers, selling our blood in a foreign land for a conflict that was not our own. We quietly lowered our weapons, slipped past each other, and charged into other meaningless duels. Pharaoh Amyatius lost. He was captured and executed in Memphis. Nepherites one ascended the throne, founding the 29th dynasty. The capital was moved to Menz itself. Everything changed in the blink of an eye. A few days later, an officer of the new pharaoh came to our camp. He made an offer. Nepherites also needed experienced warriors to consolidate his power and guard against the Persians. The price was even better than before. My countrymen cheered. Our loyalty was bought with silver, and the silver of Nepherites glittered just as brightly as that of Amyatius. I stood in the ranks, watching the new coins being passed out, and let out a long, bitter sigh. To the rulers, we are tools. To us, they are merely paymasters. Dynasties change their names, kings and generals are replaced, and when mercenaries die, more are hired. It seemed everyone was just trying to play their part well in the gods' great game, begging for a few moments of glory in their short lives. Suddenly, I remembered the stories I'd heard back in Athens about a man, sometimes called a madman, sometimes a sage. That evening, I stood alone, watching the sun sink into the desert, as red as a bleeding wound. My hand clutched a cold drachma. We sell our strength for silver and gold, but is there any gold that can buy true loyalty? And when the dust settles and the dynasties fall, what remains of the wars that were never truly ours to fight? Perhaps, in the end, we are all just mercenaries in our own lives, fighting for causes we don't even fully understand.
Persian Empire, Mesopotamia, 399 BCE. 2 years after the Battle of Cunaxa, and the Greek 10,000. Short story, the empire's wound healer. Some wounds heal with time, and some scars tell a story forever. My hands gently smoothed a layer of aromatic salve over the long scar on General Satabarzaines's chest. It had long since healed, a silvery white line stark against his skin, weathered by desert sun and wind. But whenever the weather turned, it ached like a memory demanding to be heard. I am Arash, a physician from the great city of Babylon. My work is to soothe pain, to mend what has been torn in the human body. But this scar, it spoke not just of a single battle, but of an empire questioning its own strength. "Still from that Greek spear, my lord?" I asked softly. The general did not answer, only nodded slightly, his gaze distant as he watched the sunset stain the Euphrates red. That spear, and the men who wielded them, had become our silent obsession. 2 years have passed, yet the acrid smell of blood and dust from Cunaxa still seems to haunt me whenever I close my eyes. I was there, in the hastily erected medical tents, amidst the groans of thousands of Persian soldiers. The most horrific sight was not the gaping wounds, but the realization that so many were inflicted by other Persians who had no desire to fight. The empire was bleeding itself dry. We physicians rushed through the chaos, trying to snatch lives from the grasp of death, not daring to ask if the man we were saving had fought for the rightful king, Artaxerxes II, or for the challenger to the throne, Prince Cyrus the Younger. It was a river of blood shed between two brothers and their loyal subjects, a pain that cut deeper than any blade. I have 2 sons of my own, And what could be more heart-wrenching than to see them draw swords against each other? Then they were brought in, the Greek prisoners. For the first time in my life, I saw these strangers from the West with my own eyes. They were formidable, even in chains, even covered in wounds. They stood tall. There were no wretched cries, no whimpered pleas. They endured in silence as I cleansed their wounds. I will never forget a young soldier with an arrow through his calf. As I pulled it out, he only clenched his jaw, his forehead beaded with sweat, but his brilliant blue eyes stared directly into mine, clear and defiant. They seemed carved from a different kind of stone. Their bodies were hard, their discipline an invisible wall. I used willow leaves to dull the pain and honey to disinfect, remedies that had healed generations of Mesopotamians. But as I treated them, I felt I was not just mending a body, but trying to understand a foreign spirit, an iron will I had never before encountered. Then Cyrus died, the rebellion was over. We thought it was finished. We were wrong. Those prisoners, that mercenary army, they did not break, they did not surrender. News began to trickle back to Babylon with the merchant caravans and the patrol scouts. 10,000 Greeks, lost in the heart of the most powerful empire in the world, were fighting their way home. They crossed deep rivers, climbed snow-capped mountains, and defeated the armies sent to stop them. They were like a river flowing backward, a sharp knife slicing a long, painful wound across the map of our empire. The 10,000, a name whispered in every market, and on every street corner, with a mixture of fear and awe. I often wonder what drove them. We have an empire that stretches from India to Egypt. We have gold, magnificent cities, and an army of 1 million men to protect the great king's order. But those 10,000 Greeks, what did they have besides their spears and their will? Perhaps they possessed something we were slowly losing, a reason to go home. They were not fighting for a king or for conquered land. They were fighting for themselves, for the homes and the freedom that awaited them at the end of an impossible journey. The general's scar was bandaged. He pulled his robe back on and left in silence. I stood alone, watching the first stars begin to glitter in the Babylonian sky. My job is to heal, but I realize there are wounds far deeper than the flesh. The body can be mended. But what of the wound in the soul of an empire? When a foreign army can march through our heartland unopposed, is that not a symptom of a deeper injury, one that no physician can ever hope to cure?
China, 399 BCE, the Tripartition of Jin, and the beginnings of the Warring States period. Short story, the sinner of ink and paper. Men used swords and spears to conquer a country. As for me, I killed my homeland with only a brush and a goatskin scroll. Blood was not shed from a blade, but seeped from the dark strokes of ink. I am Moran, a scribe in the city of Gupang, and I am the one who drew the border that split the heart of the state of Jin. Do not be so quick to judge me. 4 years ago, like any other ambitious young man, I dreamt of glory. I had grown weary of the musty decay of the old bamboo slips, a smell that mirrored the rot of the Jin court itself. Power belonged to those who knew only of bloodlines, while talented men like me withered away in the dark corners of the archives, copying soulless texts day after day. Then the House of Han arrived. They were like a great wind, blowing away the stagnant dust that coated the city gates. They spoke not of lineage, but of talent. They did not want empty words. They wanted men who could get things done. And I, with my calligraphy that was said to dance like a dragon in flight, and a memory that could recite every land register by heart, caught the eye of the Grand Marshal. For the first time in my life, I felt the brush in my hand carry the weight of 1,000 catties. I believed I was serving a better future, a new order that was more efficient, and I deluded myself with this thought. The secret task was given to me on a rainy night. The archive room was cold, the candlelight dancing on mountains of bamboo slips. Outside, thunder cracked like war drums, while inside, there was only the sound of my own breath and the musty scent of the past. The Grand Marshal spread a large goatskin across the table, his voice low and sharp. "Mo Ran, the future of Han rests on the strokes of your brush. Redraw the maps, redefine the registries. What once belonged to Jin will, from this day forward, belong to Han." My heart pounded. All around me was the legacy of hundreds of years of history, the old, yellowed maps and land scrolls, written by generations of scribes. They breathed with the scent of time and memory. My hand brushed over familiar names, a hill, a river, a village I had visited with my father as a child, and then I picked up the brush. The jet-black ink from my brush slithered across the goatskin, as cold and final as a sword's cut. I drew a straight line, dividing a river from which two villages on opposite banks had always drawn water. I struck out the name Jinyuan Prefecture and replaced it with Shangdang Commandery of Han. The scratching of my brush on the goatskin in the dead of night became the most horrifying sound I had ever heard. For a moment, I felt like a god, with the power to decide the fate of mountains and villages. But when the final stroke of ink dried, that feeling was replaced by a chilling emptiness. The new map was perfect, clear, and soulless. It was the brilliant work of a talented scribe, and a death sentence for a land of memories. I was promoted, rewarded. I was promoted, rewarded. I wore fine silks and walked the corridors of power I had once only dreamed of. But then, the ghosts born from my ink began to find me. I saw guard posts with the banners of Han erected on the very roads I had drawn. I heard whispers of families whose ancestral tombs were on one side of the border, but whose fields were on the other, forcing them to be interrogated each day they went to work their land. The breaking point came on a bleak winter afternoon. An old farmer came to my residence, a thin man, his back bent like a question mark. His trembling hands held out a bamboo slip that had aged to the color of honey, the deed to his family's land, passed down from his grandfather. "Sir," his voice cracked, "they say the ancestral field of my family is now public land of Han. They say the records have been written so. I beg you, look again." I took the bamboo slip, my heart feeling as if it were being squeezed in a vise. I had my assistants check the new registries, the very volumes I had compiled. And then I saw it, his plot of land, right on the edge of the new boundary, had been absorbed into public lands with a single stroke of my brush to round out the borders. Below it was my signature and my seal, as deep red as a bloodstain. I looked up into the old man's desperate eyes, and for the first time, I could not bear to look at my own handwriting. That night, I stood on the walls of Gupang, looking down at the land I had redrawn. The distant, flickering lights of the villages looked like lost stars. I had thought I was merely rearranging lines and characters, but I was not. I was rearranging the fates of men. I had torn apart the invisible bonds woven by history, kinship, and custom. They say history is written by the victors, but what of those who hold the pen to write it? Are we tools of our time, or do we shape it ourselves? I looked at my fingers, still stained with the scent of fine ink. This hand has never held a sword, but its crime, perhaps, is far heavier. And when a line you draw on paper shatters another person's life, are you still an innocent chronicler, or have you become a silent executioner,